All right, well, it's 1 o'clock. Should we
Do this.
get started? So why don't we go around first with introductions, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing today. I can start. So my name is Lisa Glidden. I'm a professor of political science, and I run our global studies program and sustainability studies for a short time longer before Glenn Graham takes that over. And I did I'm on the Restorative Practices Steering Committee, and I did the training. And I thought that the Fishbowl, it was a very good experience when we did it in our training for the first one. So I figured it would be good to do an example of it. You want to go next, Alex?
Sure. I'm Alex Velez from the anthropology department. Sorry.
Have you done any of the restorative practice trainings or?
I have not, but I'm very interested in the concept.
Okay, thanks.
I'm Liz Schmidt. I'm a professor of economics, and I've been through, I think, one of the first rounds of the restorative practice retreat that came on this campus.
I'm John Kane in economics, and I wasn't able to make it to either of the retreats.
But you're also on the steering committee.
Yeah.
Jackie, you want to go next?
Sure, Jackie Wallace, and yes, I had the pleasure of participating in the restorative justice retreat and also a couple of follow-up discussions and stuff afterwards too. So, oh, and I'm in career services.
Brandon?
Hi, I'm Brandon. I'm the Director of Student Conduct. I did the Restorative Practices Retreat back in November, and I'm also on the steering committee.
And Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Brancato in the Division of Extended Learning at the Syracuse campus. I have not yet participated in any of the restorative justice practice retreats, so I'm excited to be here today.
All right, thank you. So I think almost everyone who's here was just at the dialogue session, and so there's a lot of overlap, I think, between those, but and I don't know how many people have participated in the ACUE for pedagogy
Effective practices. And
Yeah.
strategic.
So there's a sample of fish bowls in that as well, which is a bit different than this. And so in restorative practices, there are two different kinds of fish bowls, right? One is, and basically a fishbowl activity is, I guess, kind of like what you would imagine it to be. There's a group who's in the middle, who's doing all the activity, and then there's a bunch of other observers around the edges who are just observing. And so the people who are in the center are like in a fishbowl, right? That's where the name comes from. And so for restorative practices, there are two different kinds of fish bowls. One of them is a problem-solving fishbowl, which is what we practiced at the restorative practices like retreat days. There is also a way you can do a fishbowl as like a response to a negative, like to something having happened, like a responsive circle. But today we're going to talk about sorry, Elena is coming. Today we're gonna, well, we can try to sample problem solving circle. So this is not the setup for it, right? Like this is not the way one would want to have a restorative practice fishbowl problem solving activity happen. Basically what you would want to do.
Yeah, they were clueless as to where you were. So.
Oh, okay.
Hello. How are you? Good.
That's all right. I don't want to be head of the table here.
No.
All seats were-
Low stakes.
Yeah, we were on like the second floor. And, yeah. You were there.
So yeah, it's totally fine for those of you who want to mute your images. So basically when you're doing a fishbowl like this, what you want to do is be able to set up like probably 5 or 6 chairs in the center of the room in a circle, and then have everybody else at the outskirts of it. And with a problem solving one, the person who, there's someone who has a problem that they would like to get some feedback on. And they will sit and they have 5 minutes to explain what their problem is. And then after that, the people who are in the fishbowl with them have 5 minutes just to ask clarifying questions, right? So not to give their opinion, not to, not any of that. It's really just to ask clarifying questions to make sure that they understand what the problem is. Usually, this is optional, but I think it actually worked really well. You leave one of the seats in the center open so that anyone can kind of like pop in, and if they have something that they want to say. So once you kind of set it up, they've been said the problem, people ask clarifying questions, then the activity at the feedback part of it starts. And so the person who asked the question is really just, they're not talking anymore. They're just going to write down and keep track of answers and suggestions that people are giving them to solve that problem. And then it just basically goes around the fishbowl, like, try doing this, or try this approach to it, or here's some advice I can give you about that. And then people from the outer circle, if they want, can come into the inner circle and also give some feedback.
And I think the important part is you listen. Like, so
Right.
the center of the fishbowl can't say, but I can't do that because, or well, what
Right.
about this? So I think one of the more powerful aspects of the fishbowl is the person with the problem is just going to consider all of these without weighing them or pushing back or anything, right?
Right, yeah, so all they're doing, like, it's kind of a very good practice in active listening, because all they're doing is taking it in, writing notes on it, and just like getting it all down there. They're not gonna be immediately judging and giving like, you know, this won't work, that won't work. They just have to, they can't really respond at all.
So that's the center people who can't respond.
Well, that's actually
center-
the person who has the
The
problem.
center person with the problem who's
Yeah.
asking for help is
Okay.
only going to listen to ideas and will not in real time push back or evaluate the
Gotcha,
ideas. Only will listen to ideas.
And so, you know, you go around the circle a few times, right? See if, I guess maybe it's probably should be timed, but like eventually it'll kind of like, the suggestions will die out, and then the person who has the problem gets like 2 minutes to kind of read over their paper to see like, what are the 3 suggestions that they got that they would, that they're going to try, right? So not really explaining why, but they'll just say, I'll try these things. And that's pretty much it.
Jackie noted that there were 2 scribes as well in the outer circle who would then compare notes at the end to make sure they didn't miss anything.
Thank you, Jackie. That is probably a really good, I thought that was the way we did it, so the person who was in the could just be listening and not
Right,
writing.
so there were 2 scribes,
But-
so they could be a check on each other, and so
Okay.
the fishbowl did not have to take. notes.
Okay, yeah,
That's my recollection.
all right. So do we want to try this?
Okay.
Okay,
Sure.
so
right.
we've
I'm gonna
got,
get the paper and scribe.
Who has a
Does-
problem?
yeah.
I mean, who doesn't?
Where do I start?
so, yeah, does anyone want to volunteer to go first? With the problem?
Who's got a pressing problem?
Question. So you mentioned there were 2 types of fishbowl activity, the problem solving and which was the other?
So the other one is actual like a restorative dialogue, or yeah, I think they call it a restorative dialogue one. And so that's where, like, let's say something happened that you're trying to process. You might just want to have a few people in the center who are going through the kind of like what happened, what were your feelings at the time, you know, and then everyone can talk about the impact that it had on them. And then, but there's no like, it's a little bit, it's not really even to solve whatever had happened, but it's really just a way to kind of like air out what it was that had happened. But the people who are on the outside aren't really, they're just watching the processing happen. You're welcome. So does anyone want to
Jump in the fishbowl.
I thought I had a, what was I actually did say I had a.
I don't know, we were brainstorming
I
earlier
know,
about what were the
and now I
problems.
forgot what I was gonna.
I mean, the problem could be what, like an analytical problem or?
Well, for example, a faculty member might say, we need to freshen our curriculum, but my faculty are really comfortable in teaching the same courses they've taught for 20 years. And how do I get them?
I think about what maybe a consistent one that we've been talking about for a while is student engagement. How do I get students to engage in conversations about their career or to come to events and programs or to come to class or things like that?
Right. I mean, one is, I would say, what they did some internal survey on belongingness last semester.
Mm.
And there was this persistent theme of students kind of being dissatisfied with faculty relationships, not feeling they had a relationship with faculty. It resonated with me because I felt more disengaged from my students than I ever had this
Me too.
semester in terms of who would come to my office. And there was always be some subgroup that came and talked and were your regular customers, so to speak. And I didn't really have that. So, I mean, I think, so yeah, I mean, that might be one is how do we think about how do we think about engaging students in ways that are different? It's not ratcheting up workload, but the usual things didn't work. So how do you, what are different strategies, right? That might be workload neutral for faculty
Okay.
and professional staff that are advisors, et cetera.
Good one.
Okay.
Okay.
So who
What
wants
did
to
I
be?
Okay.
Who wants to be in the fishbowl?
I think Liz volunteered.
No, so she's gonna
I
give.
distinctly remembered, I'm scribing.
Oh,
I
okay.
distinctly remember you volunteering. That's what I heard.
No, but I mean, who wants to be the ones who definitely have to offer support?
So you need 5 people to volunteer to give
Yeah, 4.
feedback. 4. Okay.
Yeah, 4 people, and then we can leave the 5th chair empty.
We have 4 key to the school of fish. They're like the school of fish in the fishbowl.
So we just have to give support if we're in the internet.
Yeah, or like try this.
Okay.
Try
Right.
this.
Yeah,
We'll have to have-
Okay.
I'd be glad to be in the inner, just
Okay.
to help.
Are you two okay? Just because you are technically in the
I guess-
inner?
You're in the inner,
Yeah.
right? Literally.
Sorry, Alex.
Is anyone online wanna be in that I'll come to you for suggestions also?
I don't mind jumping in.
Okay, all right, Jackie. And then there's an empty seat. So John, do you want to be in it?
The MTC, okay.
You want to start in the empty seat?
You start
Okay.
in the
And then John can step out and anyone else can just, when we get to after Scott, anyone can make a suggestion too.
Mhm.
So,
So I think I have to state my problem.
yes,
Yes.
kind
Okay.
of succinctly.
I
if
already
you
did,
want.
but I'll have to do it again.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
wait, and actually,
restate
hold
it.
on, before you do that, does anyone else who's in the outer circle want to volunteer to be a scribe? To write down the suggestions?
I can be a scribe.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Okay, go ahead, Liz.
Okay, so my problem is, data suggests this is a problem wider on campus, is how to shift gears in developing a relationship with my students. And while we might blame COVID, I think it's some combination of a longer slow creep of social media exacerbated by COVID means that my traditional ways of trying to engage students, to be welcoming, to develop relationships with students have just fallen flat. So I need to find something different, probably not something more, but recognizing that these ways are ineffective, something different. So ideally, I'd like to better engage students more effectively, maybe in ways that would be workload neutral, that would replace other strategies.
Okay.
So does anyone, it was very good, you did that in 20 seconds. Does anyone, we have 5 minutes for clarifying questions. So how
What
many?
are some of the strategies that you talked about that you had used in the past that aren't working?
Sure. So I often used, I've long changed my name to student drop-in hours from office hours. That's been kind of a technique suggested. Sometimes I've tried to actually have office hours at the Lake Effect Cafe. I took a big risk. I had 220 students. I said, if you show up, I will buy you a cocoa or something and come talk to me. And no one did. So that hurt. I know. But it could have been, I told my husband, I might spend $500 today. So I'm sorry. But it's actually a good thing. So I tried that. I always have snacks. I have a big basket of snacks. I have an office that's very decorated. It's not like the empty office. It's got pictures of my family, my hometown, solar tchotchkes on the window. I have $1 million view of the lake. I'm very explicit with students. I say, I hope you'll come see me because I have $1 million view, a comfy couch, and a basket full of snacks. Right. And so I always, so I'm kind of deliberate reminders. Like I said, snacks, welcoming environment, drop-in hours, allowing simultaneous drop-in Zoom. So I'm actually on the Zoom. I have a Zoom room open during those drop-in hours, as well as for students to come through in person.
And so how many students / advisees are we talking about here?
Well, I taught, I had 200, a little over 200 students, 235, 240 students this spring semester. That's my large semester because I teach a large enrollment class. And then I don't have very many advisees. And Econ doesn't have a lot of majors, but I probably have maybe 10 advisees tops as well.
Any other clarifying questions?
I think you mentioned there was a survey that was conducted.
Mhm.
What came out of the survey as to what were student barriers to?
Right. I don't think I think the survey doesn't always delve into students' barriers, but it really, students actually really had Likert scales and talked about their satisfaction or how belonging they felt. And it was a striking common result that students didn't feel this sense of belongingness with faculty, that they hadn't developed relationships with, you know, a faculty buddy or something that could be their go-to person when they were having a problem.
Do we know who was surveyed? Was that like a sample of?
It was actually the entire, I mean, a survey went out to basically the entire student body, and the response rate was pretty strong. They had over 1,000 responses, which is actually a really good response rate.
So they're actually engaged.
They were engaged in the survey of telling
It's
me
more
they're not
than
engaged
something.
with me.
It's something. That's really interesting that you think.
Mhm.
Can I ask a clarifying question as a scribe?
Okay.
Yeah,
That allow, I don't know the structure of this. I'm wondering if anyone knows about how the data in the survey were, I don't know what the right word is, truncated maybe. Did they look at the responses of each, like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior? Because I'm also wondering how the pandemic played into that for students who came in during the pandemic versus those who came in after we sort of normalized again.
I do not have any of those kinds of details about the sample and all of that. There was some general talk of the outcome in the retention meeting I was at. But that one kind of struck out to me because that was like the exact same thing I was thinking about what I was doing wrong or what was no longer.
so Grace had a question.
Uh-huh.
Do you, is this a problem that you noticed only this semester? Maybe the size of the class made them feel? Or is it the same when you are teaching? So
I've been teaching a large spring lecture since the spring of 2013 consistently. So every spring I would at least have a dozen, you know, steady customer, I could call them steady customer, you know, that came to all the office hours. I could count on them coming every week, talking to me maybe about class, but other things as well. Now, in the fall, when I teach upper level and I have smaller classes, I did have a better relationship with the class that had 23 students in it than I do now. But I don't think it's a symptom of the large lecture because I've successfully fostered relationships that continued into their career in the large class over the decade that I've taught large classes.
Okay. All right, we have 40 seconds left. Any other clarifying questions? All right. So actually, I just reread the instructions. It is 10 minutes.
Oh, well.
No, 10 minutes for giving feedback.
Oh,
No
okay.
more than 10 minutes. All right, so we're ready to, John, you want to start?
Sure. Have you tried any way of using students' names, either by randomly using a random name generator or having students put little name cards on the table?
Okay. And I'm not supposed to respond.
Right.
Right.
We kind of shouted it out. Would that be okay? Because I can't
Yeah,
tell.
go ahead, Jackie, you can go next. You're technically next anyway.
Sure. Having a collaborative approach to setting expectations at the beginning of the semester on how to engage and interact and sharing kind of the personal stories for yourself of kind of who you are at that stage of the game, starting off in your academic career and personalizing kind of who you are as an instructor.
try playing around with different times of office hours to see if maybe a like later afternoon coffee might be better than 10 a.m.
Survey students to find out where they're at, if they're living on campus and going into that hall to have office hours that one day. And personally inviting them, knowing that they are there.
Sure. I found that some of my students have like this kind of face-to-face anxiety. So sometimes virtual drop-in hours work a little better. You can use Zoom, Google Hangouts, or if you really want to cast a wider net and just, really want to meet them like where they're most comfortable, you could also try things like, maybe not Twitch, but maybe Discord. A lot of the grad students at Binghamton actually use Discord to meet with their students.
Yeah, the Anthro Club had Discord space for a while. But one thing that we did, I had open lab hours. So when I was going to be in the lab doing work anyway, I just had it open. And then I gave people permission, they had the card access. And so then they would just hang out there. And so a lot of people came by, it became kind of like a little hangout. And I think I saw a lot more people than I have in previous semesters actually because of that. Because my office is very tiny and I think that's a factor. So the lab is a bigger space. They don't feel like they're sitting on my desk practically when they're in the office. So space is an issue. Lab out.
I think trying to get more one-to-one, one-on-one invitations, like I'm sure if it's like any other classroom, at the end of class or at the beginning of class, you usually have some students that come up to you and talk about maybe a small topic. Maybe you can suggest, like, I'd really love to expand on that with you. Can you stop by my office hours later this afternoon? Here they are. Give them a personal invite, and just to get them used to coming to the drop-in hours.
Exit tickets. So when students are leaving, or maybe, split it up like A through whatever this week, I want to, hear about and hand in a little autobiography about yourself. And I'm going to write you a personal note, kind of breaking it down to like, manageable size groups of 25 and try to get to know them through that less informal or passive ways.
Require them to meet with you.
No.
We did that for GST 110. It's a smaller thing, but we do mid-semester check-ins where I schedule one-on-ones, or I could even work in like small groups of being able to not hold class that day, but I can fit it in because of the curriculum. So
I have one more, I think, if it works. If you have I don't know if you do, but if you have a classroom with like a TA, a teaching assistant, have you ever tried to combine your drop-in hours with your TA, or have your TA, and maybe your TA's having more success with drop-in hours, maybe they're more comfortable talking with your TA, which is also a success. They're still getting the help they need.
Actually, that is a good one. This semester was my first time having TAs, but I specifically wanted us to have, and the TAs also had their drop-in hours. I didn't mandate this, but I did ask if they could schedule it so that our drop-in hours could complement each other so that we weren't like running concurrently. So that if they couldn't see me for some reason, they could easily drop into one of the TAs.
have some fun opportunities to connect, even if it's 5 minutes at the beginning of the class, for even students to get to know each other in small groups and maybe have the same small groups, and then being able to check in and, be intentional at each class to be able to sit in with, different groups just to get them know, each other. And then of course you.
We had a really active club. And so PF faculty were invited to go along, although I think I was going to go to some of the club events. So meeting people in a different venue helped. And related to the club, I think we had like advisement group events too. So that was the other people who weren't making the club event.
Yeah, find out where they're going, if it's clubs, organization, or maybe you have quite a few students that are going to the involvement fair or something, being able to stop in and see them as they're coming and going.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me was the field school. So there were 10, 11 people in a field school. They created their own little cohort kind of. And then because they got to know each other like for an extended period of time, they naturally drew more people into that orbit. And so there was a much more accurate So if I do that every other year, I think if you had events like that, maybe even Quest, something that people did together in a group, might actually create the cohort that naturally would gravitate towards better relationships with each other.
I thought of something really ridiculous, and I'm sorry, that's why I giggled. You know how like they have have a flat professor that goes places with them that have to be appropriate, and then, you know, post it. Flat done shit.
What?
Like, you know, like Flat Stanley,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
like.
Oh, we did that for undergraduates. Here it's a bit.
Right, any other ideas?
Well, this kind of piggybacks off of an idea that I think Jacqueline had before about the sort of like mandated, mandated meetings, but also kind of combining those with like a specific assignment in mind. So for instance, for the advanced forensics class, I kind of mandate that they have to meet with me because one of the assignments that they have is to write a prospectus for a proposed project in like forensic science. And so I kind of mandate that they have to meet with me, not just so, I can sign off on their topic, but also so I can make sure that number one, it's feasible. And number two, it also, sort of gets their foot in the door for like, repeated meetings. Because I did have some students come in even after the first, because I only mandate one meeting and I had them, repeatedly coming afterwards.
Mhm. Name tags in front of where everyone sits, so you can call on folks by name. It's harder in the back, or even ask that before answering questions, or at some point in time being able just to say their name before they, answer to, just to get to know first names.
One suggestion that Vichy Sathi and Kelly Hogan had was to use police tape or something to block off the back half of the rows just to get a little bit more density.
I can hook you
more
up.
engagement.
Have some for the elevator.
I got it in the car
We
right
have some
now.
caution tape left over for the elevator.
Are you gonna put like a chalk outline in the back too? Being strategic about the before and after class. Maybe being able to be in the back of the room as people are coming in and asking certain questions, or checking in as people are coming in or leaving, or just staying behind or coming early. Depends upon if there's classes before or after.
I think this is not for you to do, but I think it would be really interesting to get some like disaggregated data from that survey to find out, like, I think the years are important. I'm sure they didn't name faculty, but like, I wonder too, like my connections with students as I've gotten older are very different, and so when you're like young and hip, you get people who like to, yeah, but when you're like their mom, it's like, ugh.
They might go for you for mom things.
Well,
That's funny.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I'd rather see an ethnography. The survey is virtually useless. And it's really interesting that they actually answered the question. That's engagement. It may not be telling you what you want to hear, but it's telling you they're thinking about it and
Right.
they're engaging with you. If they're really not engaged, they're not answering the question, period. So I don't think that data is showing exactly what you think it is. It was really interesting hearing, we had a student do a COVID research on like how people changed their social network, and what they told him, how they interpreted it was the opposite of what had actually happened to them when you actually did the ethnography. That actually engaged more in very specific ways on media and on other things that they themselves weren't. They told him that they did it, but they weren't open about it. So I feel like actually doing more of an ethnography, you'd actually get answers about how specifically they met with people. How often did you see people? And you'd get a very different account than a huge answer. My goodness, that's like the hard part, right? Getting people to answer surveys. Anyway.
All right, so do you need a minute to look through to think about 3 things you would try?
Oh, let's see. I think I'm gonna try some of these things I've done, but I actually think scale is kind of a problem, but I do think in some way I'm going to try a mandated meeting around an assignment. All right, so mandate the meeting, but actually have it center around assignment, like choosing a topic or something like that. I might try greeting at the doors. I like that idea. That's actually a very Lasallian idea in educational theory. But I'm not fencing it off with tape. John.
We'll make the room structure.
Let's see, I mean, I have a like naming climate expectations at the beginning. Oh, and I think I will try this one-on-one invitation with some students that ask me about things. So mandated meeting centered around an assignment, greeting students at the doors, one-on-one invitations.
So can we help you at all? Do you need any support in implementing those things?
Nope, I think I got it. Oh, these mandated, this will be interesting. Mandated. Might need support afterwards. Might need to find Diane Brand's frozen margarita refrigerator.
She has one of those.
Oh, yeah.
I'm her neighbor across the way. She's never told me this. What?
All right, so congratulations, everyone.
Thanks.
You did
Woo, problem solved.
you did a restorative practice problem solving circle. So I don't know, how did you, it's really hard not to talk. I
It is
think.
very, well, it's really hard for me not to.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a general principle, but it's like really hard for me. So it is. I mean, I think, like I said, I think there's a lot of power in this and just kind of listening through these. Some of these things I probably already do in some way, but that didn't mean I should reject them out of hand. You just listen, because as people are shouting them and you don't shoot them down, other people, it actually inspired other people, and even in the small group, to give me additional ideas that I hadn't done because they had heard the other ideas that people were making. But if those ideas were actually answered and shot down or clarified right away, I don't think the additional things
Right.
would come forth.
I think that if you're thinking of doing this in the class, that would be kind of hard though, right? If you're doing restorative fishbowl in class, because you have people having trouble.
Well,
So
there's
there's-
clearly an optimal size. Like this
Yeah.
is smaller than optimal, I
Right.
think, in terms of what comes in, but I'm not going to do this in the class of 100.
What would you do it in a class of
I don't hate
like
myself that much.
14 or 15, 8, 19? Is it too
We done in
small?
third. I mean, we did it with a group of 60 and it actually went very well.
Yeah.
It was very structured.
So, yeah, and let me just, because Lisa asked the question about, can I repeat again the structure and time? So,
Oh, yes.
and this is, I mean, I also did this training back in November and I did not take notes then. I was looking while we were in the other one for like the actual instructions and I came up with this one, but I don't know that these are hard and fast rules, but I mean, I think you probably want like maybe like 10% of the class to be in the circle and 9, right? So that would be like maybe in a class of 50 or 60. I don't know. It might get unwieldy because you don't want the people in the outer circle also have to sit there quietly
Yeah.
and pay attention. So
And
you
that's-
don't want them, you don't want it to be so big that they feel like they're.
And
you know,
not
they're
everybody,
just-
right. And I think what happened in that group of 60, 70 of us with that restorative practice, most people did not come and sit with the fishbowl and offer ideas.
Right.
It was,
Yeah.
it was just a small percentage, but it was a large enough group that small percentage still generated
Right.
a lot of ideas.
So basically you want to have the person who has the problem and then an additional 3 or 4 or 5 seats in the center. And I think it makes sense to leave 1 seat empty, right? So someone volunteers to explain their problem. And I would just caution to say, make sure you know the problem ahead of time. Because there are some problems that should not be discussed even if everyone is like, oh no, we won't, we're in a safe space. Like there are some problems that you don't want out there. So you want a problem that actually like where people could give solutions to. And then, so you ask for the, 2 or 3 or 4 volunteers to come and sit in the center in the fishbowl, leave 1 seat empty, and then the person has 5 minutes to explain their problem. The people in the fishbowl have 5 minutes to ask clarifying questions. And then you leave about 10 minutes for the solution to solutions to be offered. Or not even, but like options. So the person who has the problem can't say anything more after they answer the clarifying questions. They just have to sit there and take notes, and, you know, listen, right, and take notes. And then people should offer suggestions, but like in that way, like, try this, have you thought of that, right? So like very, offering possible suggestions. And then, once those 10 minutes are up, you give the person some time to go through their list to see what other, you know, which solutions they might want to try. And to list, like, maybe not even like necessarily to say why, but just like, you know, they'll do those 3 things. And then Lisa, I would just add, we also added that someone who's in the outer circle also should take notes, as a backup.
So I wanted to share out too, there's a, some best practices with Stanford's life design that's very similar to, I felt like the Fishbowl as well, where I've implemented with like our brainstorming opportunities with our promotions interns, is that we have a problem on the board and that everyone has an opportunity to give out solutions and stuff like that. And we use yes and approach, that someone says something and then the next person says yes and they keep adding and keep adding and keep adding. And at the end, we go up and circle our top 3 and stuff, things that we want to do about it. We did it with our SUNY organization and with our life design training. We actually did it in online mural board, which everyone like small groups had a chance to put a problem. And then in their small groups, that one person similarly stood back and everyone started adding to the Post-its. And then they had a chance to look at the problem. And if the solutions weren't necessarily targeted at kind of what they're trying to get at, they had a chance to reframe the problem. So that way, like, oh, actually the problem really is this. And then we did it again. And then we did it a 3rd time. And so sometimes it's the problem, you're not getting exactly the information that you want, but having an opportunity to reframe it and give feedback again was kind of neat to see kind of the evolution of the feedback that was received throughout too. So I think this opportunity, how we do it with Restorative practices, the clarifying questions, I think help get to that a little bit too, as well. But those are some other ways that I think have been pretty cool ways to help problem solving and stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of this is set in stone, right? Like, this is the rules, like you can.
The radical collaboration, I think, is the best thing of just having that space and time to hear from each other and try things.
Right. All right, so any other questions? I'm happy to share, for what it's worth, this image that I took from somebody's blog on the Fishbowl restored, like, problem solving one, if people want. It kind of like lays out some of the background. I will say the one thing that I left out of it that they have is the so ask if the person needs any support, and then ask how you're going to celebrate when it's been sorted out. So I don't know, margaritas sounds good to me. But,
Nice single malt, Aldi's on the lake.
so you can make it as, we're not like such a touchy feely group, but like you can make it however you want. All right, well, we don't have time for another one. I mean, we figured we would have time for one and then to kind of decompress. Or not decompress, what's the word? Debrief.
Debrief. There we go.
You've got a question on your chat?
Got some chat. You can click on the chat.
Oh,
I don't know what people in the chat have chatted.
okay.
So we don't have time for Fishbowl of where Kristen's going for happy hour for her birthday.
That's right. Happy birthday.
Kristen, we celebrating? How are we celebrating?
We're not invited.
My family knows my quirks, that for celebration days, my one ask is that they don't ask me what I want to do. I make decisions all day long. This is a special day. Don't make me make a decision. So
Nice.
So we'll go to Bev's. We'll meet at Bev's in like 20
you
minutes.
get it. You get it. You're like,
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you for hosting.
And yeah, happy to help if people want to do it, like help facilitating in departments or whatever. All right. Enjoy this beautiful day.
Good luck out there.
All right, so I know I should not.
Just stop the
and
recording.
Stop the recording,
Yep.
okay.
And then we'll exit from there.